Hi, I did a post around my birthday just a week ago, um, touching on how I'd been affected by working in slaughterhouses, and that kind of got a few people asking me questions, and I thought it might be an opportunity to sort of explain here how um, I kind of deal with that, being a vegan animal rights activist with a background in the animal agriculture industry. So I thought I'd talk briefly about how I do deal with it, or don't, as the case may be. So what it is I I should say straight off that I find it slightly difficult talking about the effect on me of having worked in that industry, because for me it will always and should always be about what the animals suffer and what they went through, what I witnessed them going through, what I participated in that they had to go through. So I'm very conscious that when me and others talk about our history in animal agriculture and how it's affected us, that it sounds like we're after sympathy, we uh, or we're making it about us. So I just wanted to say from the outset that my primary purpose in doing this is to open people's eyes, talking about it, to uh, both what it will do to people who have worked in that industry or who are working in that industry, what they can expect further down the line in terms of mental health problems and normalised behaviour, but also, more importantly, how it can make you focus positively, channeling that experience into animal rights activism. So I spent a few years in slaughterhouses as a butcher, and I even managed a poultry farm. So I've seen all kinds of horrific and eye-opening things happening in all of those industries. The way I dealt with it at the time is a subject for another video, which I'll do, which will explain sort of my thought processes and feelings while I was involved in that. But here I'm sort of looking back on how I deal with it as an activist, having had that background. So number one, it's really useful because now I've got that experience, I can speak with direct experience, primary knowledge of what goes on. So when people challenge us in what we're trying to bring to light and say, well, this isn't what happens, or this is an extreme example, or whatever other justification they come up with, I can, hand on heart, look them in the eye and tell them I have not seen a single video by, for example, Anonymous for the Voiceless or any other form of activism, or even those very graphic films that you see footage of, like Dominion, Earthlings, Land of Hope and Glory, etc. There's nothing I've seen on any of those that I haven't seen worse in real life, firsthand. And I was working in what you would call well-respected, high-end abattoirs. So we're not talking about mass units. We're talking about small slaughterhouses, family-run ones, ones that seem to tick every box and got no negative attention from animal welfare organisations at the time. Bear in mind, this is a long time ago, and from government agencies or veterinarians who were doing inspections at the time. the ones I was working in were regarded as high end, yet they still had things happening on a daily occurrence that far worse than what you'll see in any of the footage that vegans try and show you on social media. Far worse. So if you believe that what they're showing you is an extreme example, then I'm here to tell you you're wrong, because what they're showing you doesn't even scratch the surface. There are so much worse things happening that just don't come to light, and no one, it's in no one who is working in those industries' interest to show you the reality of what's happening. So that's number one. I use it as a tool to be able to engage with people who perhaps don't necessarily believe that what they're seeing in terms of footage is realistic or is an accurate depiction of what's going on. So that's the knowledge side of it. So I can utilize that and use it in my activism to engage with people more fruitfully, I think. So that's one way of dealing with it. Another way is that it gives me a kind of explanation when I look back on it as to how my behaviour evolved, and how through a certain period of my life in my younger years, violence had become so normative that I would regularly get into trouble or go out, get involved in fights, assault people without any thought of it, and how I know people involved in those industries who have been involved with domestic abuse and all kinds of despicable crimes against humans as well as other animals. So when I hear, for example, a policeman or a social worker sharing information about the propensity of people working in those industries to commit specific crimes against vulnerable adults or children, I'm never surprised. And the reason I'm not surprised is because when we're working in that industry, we are sort of switched off to the reaction of the victim. The victim in that case is the animal. So if you were empathizing with that animal, you wouldn't do that job for very long at all. So the goal of those who are employing you in that industry is to make you see this victim as a thing, not as a being, and eventually that works, and you become sort of immune to seeing the suffering. You don't see it. You become blind to it. It's an extreme cognitive dissonance. You do not realize at the time that you're causing harm and suffering and pain and misery. At the time you're just doing a job, and you think these animals are things that are causing you problems, getting in your way, being a pain, and that's how you deal with it. It's a bit like, I have a friend who served in the forces, who was pretty much taught that Irish people were almost subhuman, because he had to go out there and was supposed to be able to kill them if he needed to, because of the troubles that were happening at the time and where he was based. So it's the same kind of brainwashing that goes on, that went on with those troops, that goes on with people working in animal agriculture, except the difference is it's not against a group of another group of humans, it's against another group of mammals or birds or whatever their species may be that they're employed to dispatch. So when I look back at all the violent behaviour I engaged in, and guys who might have looked at me across a bar and I went up to them and headbutted them or punched them or whatever, and I look back and I'm disgusted with myself, and I think that's unacceptable, in just the same way as I look back and think that what was happening to those animals in the slaughterhouses or farms was unacceptable as well. So that's number two, is it helps me to explain to myself why and how I was engaging in that kind of behavior in a social setting. So violence becomes normative, and when it does, that's dangerous because it spills over not just into how you treat animals, but how you treat other humans as well. And it's really easy to make that step from dealing with a vulnerable victim that happens to be, for example, a pig, sheep, cow, or chicken, to a child or a woman or a smaller man. It is a connection that I can see happening a lot. And as I say, when I hear social workers, police, or others explain that it's a common question they ask victims of domestic violence, for example, is has your partner ever hurt or threatened to hurt an animal, a pet cat, for example, or a dog, or whatever? And you have to ask yourself, why are they asking that? And they're asking that because the kind of person who thinks it's acceptable to do that would not find it unacceptable to harm anyone else who they thought they could get away with harming. So it's an explanation for a lot of social violence. So that's two. Number three, how I deal with it is I don't. So I regularly have nights where I cannot sleep, and I've gone through the whole process because I found faith a few years ago, and I've went through the whole process of forgiving myself. But that's easier said than done. I can forgive others who've harmed me quite easily, but forgiving yourself is a much tougher thing to do, especially when you can't ask for forgiveness from the victims because they're dead. It's incredibly difficult. And even though I've gone through that process, still some weeks I hardly sleep at all. Some weeks I can get a couple of nights where I really struggle to sleep, and it's because of the memories imprinted in me of what I witnessed and engaged in. So there's a lot of trauma in there. It's led to all kinds of depressions. It means when I have a problem in life, I can magnify it, and it can seem a lot more, a lot harder than it really is. So I struggle to maintain and form relationships, and I think it's all connected. And some of the depressions I've had, and whenever I am in a depression, it can be triggered by seemingly small things like a relationship breakdown or whatever. But what's lying underneath it, when you examine it, I still go back to that, how I behaved when I was younger and what I witnessed in those slaughterhouses particularly, but also on farms. And it can come to a point where I get so depressed and suicidal that the pervading thoughts are always crowding in on me about how I don't deserve to live because of what I've done to other animals, and how many animals are dead because of the job I did. And people can be really kind and tell me that you're a changed man, and you're saving animals by what you're doing and sharing your message and doing your activism, but it doesn't make it any easier. And if I'm in the depths of a depression or feeling suicidal, then I can hear the screams of the pigs. Particularly, I can remember specific individual examples with chicken, turkeys, sheep, cows, and pigs that and also humans who worked in there that are incredibly graphic and unpleasant memories to have to hold. So I've seen humans who work in that industry seriously injured. I've seen them seriously harm themselves. Someone who worked with me committed suicide in an incredibly graphic way, and it doesn't bear thinking about some of the things I've witnessed. It's horrific. Some of the things I saw happen to pigs particularly stick with me because they are so similar to us in so many ways, and to yeah, I don't want to go into too much graphic detail because I haven't put trigger warnings on this video, but I will do in future ones. I can tell you some of the more horrific things that I witnessed, and I'll probably look into that in a different on a different video. So we'll do that in the future because I want to be able to set a warning about the content if I'm going to talk about that, because some of the things that I've seen happen, yeah, as I said right at the outset, there's stuff there that is far worse than any video you've seen footage of on social media, and yeah, we won't touch into that just yet. So I think I just want to close this one by saying that I'm always open to talking about the effects on people who work in that industry, and I would advise anyone working in it to, if you can, get out quickly, and if you can't, if you feel trapped, if you feel like you've got no alternatives, no options, then at least get counselling, because you are going to be building up a hell of a problem for the future. The best thing you can do is get out of it, go vegan in order to help you to cope with it, feel like you're giving something back, become an activist even more, because then you feel like you're giving even more back and trying to atone for what you've done, because you will down the line suffer. You may not think so now because you're because you're so so involved in the industry that you're not realizing at the moment what's happening, but you will make connections. If you want to talk to me, send me a message. I can talk to you about how it's impacted me, and what steps you can take to try and get out of that industry, because it's not just the fact that these animals are going to suffer because of the job you're doing, but you are going to suffer too. And it may not seem obvious to you now, but you will be harming other people. You will be harming yourself, and you're going to have to sleep with all the stuff you're doing on your conscience. And when you're out of it, and your eyes have been opened, and you're not as involved in that industry anymore, you become open to receiving information about how these animals are suffering. Once you've seen that and you're aware of what you're doing and what you've done, you're going to have a hell of a lot of problems mentally. So you need to talk to people, you need to get it out, and you need to step away from this industry, because those people who are employing you, they're not interested in your welfare. They want to make money, and they're not bothered about you in 20 years' time when you're lying in bed thinking about how you're going to kill yourself, or that your life's worth nothing, or that you just cannot forgive yourself for what you've done. They don't care about that, but I do, and I want you to be the best version of you that you can be, and you will not be that person while you continue to cause harm to other living beings. And you may not realize you're doing it now. You may think I'm talking nonsense, but down the line you're going to realize it, and you're going to say, I wish I'd listened to that guy and got out of it. And I hope that somebody hears this and is able to make a connection to what they're doing and their mental health, or their behavior socially, or any of the other connections that there are to mental health, for example, and what you're doing for a living. So if I can go away with one thing from this video, I hope it's that someone's eyes are opened who's working in that industry, and they get out of it while they can. Ideally, become an activist, become a vegan, try and speak up, try and atone for what you're doing, which is what I'm attempting to do. I'll never achieve that. I can never fully forgive myself or be fully forgiven in my eyes, because I see the world like that. That's not a bad thing necessarily, because it means I will always strive now to do my very best to advocate for animals and to do what I can to change the world and make it more compassionate and vegan. So that's my motivation. It's not a bad thing, so don't feel sorry for me. Hopefully I can help people to see things differently. That's one of my two goals. My other goal is ultimately to ease the suffering of animals and end it. That's my primary purpose in all of these videos, to get people to think about how they treat animals and to get them to consider a compassionate alternative. So please go away, look into research what these animals are capable of, how long they normally live for, the way they would live if they were living in the wild compared with the way they're treated, how they're killed, and their lifespan while they're being used and utilized for ultimately human greed, because we don't need them. We don't need animal products for clothing. We don't need them for food. We just take them because we can, and that is no basis for a moral position. So I'll leave it there, and next one I do, I'll probably delve into some of that difficult subject matter of some of the incidences that I witnessed, and those of you who are interested in hearing that, it may be useful from an activist point of view to hear it from someone who's done it. It may be useful for someone who's involved in that industry to hear it from a different perspective. So I'll get into that at the next one, and for now, peace.